An emotion is a collection of responses that begin in the brain and that are directed to other parts of the brain and to the body. Some of those responses you actually can see. For instance, if you're talking to somebody who is having an emotion, let's say happiness or anger or fear, you actually see some of those responses. Like, for instance, a change in the person's face, a change in the person's musculoskeletal posture, a change in the color of the skin. It can turn flushed or go pale, and so on. As you realize, I'm giving you a definition that concentrates on this sort of outward movement, which is in fact what is implied by the word emotion, movement away from the center of the being. And I'm not telling you anything about how does it feel to have an emotion, because that is not really part of the definition of emotion as I see it. That is part of the definition of feeling. And if you ask me what a feeling is, then I tell you that a feeling is our perception of an emotional state. So when you have somebody who is having all the responses that constitute the fear response, that constitute the emotion of fear or the emotion of anger or the emotion of happiness, then that same person, as the response gets created, is going to have a perception of all of those changes that are occurring, some in the body, some in the brain itself. And when you have that perception, you have a feeling. Clearly, some emotions are very natural, so they have been planted through evolution. They exist as very old repertoires of behavior in organisms, much simpler than we are. And then it's the use that we give, the value that we give to them, that is very dependent on the culture. So in certain cultures, the way one processes embarrassment is very different from another culture. There's certain cultures that will tolerate it, and other cultures where it can lead to suicide. That is obviously cultural. That is not set in the machinery, that is not set in the genes that create an organism. But the basic arrangement that leads to those emotions, in very good part, is probably going to be laid down in the circuitry. And so ultimately, the emotional responses are always part of the stock with which one regulates the management of life.
Is there a watch on that hand? Okay. Okay. Your left hand. Okay. You just find a comfortable position in your lap, maybe, or something. Try not to move them. We'll pick that up as well.
It's a red barn with a white roof and some utility lines attached to it. It also has a little structure on top that's red with a white roof on it. To the left, there are some trees. There's a blue sky. A mutilated foot. The skin seems to have ripped away in a triangular shape. Very red and bloody.
One incident that stands out in my mind is when I recorded on a polygraph the skin conductance responses of a patient with a bilateral frontal lobe lesion who didn't have responses to these shocking slides that I showed. And these are slides of, you know, mutilations and things things that, I mean, I had worked with these in psychology. I mean, most people have a very, just a dramatic, profound response to these. They're very shocking. And to watch this patient sit and look at these slides one after the next, and to have the same kind of sort of flat, you know, ho-hum response to a picture of a barn as he did to a picture of a mutilated hand was very impressive. And I can remember bringing the polygraph record down, the tracing, and showing it to Tony and saying, look at this is completely bizarre. I mean, what's going on here? Because he has these responses for just like basic, like a loud noise or something. So it's not that his, whole system is shut down. It's just that for these emotional stimuli, it's shut down.
It's a red barn with
I remember thinking that, how can this be? What can be the explanation? And Tony, in his usual way, immediately had an idea. He said, well, I think I thought maybe my machine wasn't working right, or, I had done the experiment wrong or something. But Tony said, completely different response. He said, this is fascinating. I mean, this is telling us something.